Hello, welcome. Very nice to be here. There have been a lot of questions that you've all been sending in, and so we decided we would do this in a Facebook Live format to try to really begin to answer some of these questions. It's just end the video, it says. Oh, I see. So there's a good amount of things that we could talk about, and I think answering your questions, we're probably going to cover most of the opportunities to talk about many of these issues. But let me start kind of setting the parameter of where we're addressing this whole question of climate change, disruptions in political systems, disruptions in wars, disruptions in people being moved out of their status quo. And let's set it from the standpoint that this is a spiritual event. All of the change that we're playing with is starting as a spiritual event. Now, that spiritual event is not designed to be good or bad. It's simply a shift from something that was to something that will be. And if you can keep it in that simple of a format, particularly for this set of conversations and questions, the ability to be able to look from a larger area to kind of 30,000 foot, if you would, down to, well, why is that happening and why is that happening and how does this relate to that, I think will make more sense rather than trying to take it down on ground level and ask the question, why is he doing that or she doing that? So if we can use that as a format, and we'll talk into that format because you've sent a lot of questions in that kind of relate within that format. But from that standpoint, this is really an interesting experience that we're playing in. And one of the things about this experience is it's just starting. It's not coming to a completion. In one way of looking at it, it's beginning to evolve. So let me turn this over to Roxanne and kind of let's start with some of your questions. And so Roxanne's going to explain what to do here, as always.
So hello everybody, it's nice to see all your names popping up on my screen here. If you have a question, a lot of people send in questions from Instagram and emails and Facebook, so I have a bunch I can start with, and you're the priority because you're here, present time. So if you have a question, just type it in to the Facebook comment window there. And also, if you have a hard time seeing Jim, or if you logged in and you can't see Jim, try refreshing your screen. I had to refresh 3 times before I see him, which sounds like a funny thing to say. I had to refresh 3 times to see you. Okay.
Maybe I should materialize more or something.
This question, Jim, is from Victoria. We hear so much about climate change, but I'm also aware of many climate cycles that the Earth has been through. Can we change the climate, or is it more about us changing how our behaviors impact the climate?
So there are multiple aspects of this going on at one time. And your ability to change all of those aspects is challenging, questionable at best. The aspect that you can change is you. How do you engage with this whole aspect of where we're playing? But there have been many cycles on the Earth. There have been an estimated 178 times the North and South Pole have shifted over many millions and millions of years. We'll talk about that pole shift as we kind of get into other questions. But this whole approach to what is going on, it's going to go on. There is climate change that is man-made, and there's climate change that is being directed by the sun and beyond the sun. So a lot of what is happening is as the sun goes into a new cycle, not just the 11-year cycle that many people are used to, where the kind of the corona mass ejections in and the volatility of the sun in an 11-year cycle is really fascinating, because when you have lots of sunspots and lots of coronal mass ejections and all of that electromagnetic field unfolding, exploding, it's at the equator. And then it goes through an 11-year cycle, and all that sunspots moves up to the north and the south pole. Very little activity. That's just one cycle and related to the sun. But the sun is going into a new cycle. And the electromagnetic field shift of the sun is directly affecting everything on the earth. The weather, the construct of moods, emotions, and so we can talk about that as we go forward. But the key piece really is you. How are you preparing yourself to deal with circumstances that are possible in your reality, not probable, but possible, and how will you deal with them if in fact they unfold? We'll talk more about that, I'm sure, as we go through this.
Jim, this one is from Arian. Is the core of the Earth heating more than the surface?
So again, it's an electromagnetic sun issue. One of the things that is happening, you ever play with a top as a little kid, or you watch kids play with a spinning top? You push it down and the top begins to spin. And when you get it pushed down enough and you get enough motion, centripetal force pushing outward, you create a very specific balance, and everything rotates around that center axis point until it doesn't. And so you begin, if you watch the top, it'll spin and you stop pushing it down. That's a lot of the balance in the sun. And all of a sudden you begin to get this little wobble. The Earth is in a little bit of a wobble. Oh, really minute, something you aren't even, for the most part, paying attention to or able to detect. It's not a feeling. But that wobble is starting to occur, and as it's beginning to occur, it's creating a little bit of an off-balanceness. So the Earth is in motion more than it is heating at this point, but it is the motion that's creating the wobbles at this point. So we'll talk more about that, I think, in a couple more questions.
Jim, this one is from Zeta. How do we deal with the grief of the animals and nature that have been burned in the fires?
See, this is part of the whole bigger question. How do you deal with the shifting on the earth, population shifting? So the easiest answer that I keep running into is the answer that Abraham Hicks presented way back in the 90s. All the animals aren't dying, they're going home. And when she used to say that, it was like, oh, okay, maybe, But as you watch the ending of species on the planet, they're simply all shifting. And when you look at it in this fifth multidimensional space, you begin to start to recognize those animals are there. A lot of people were playing in the kind of post-mastering alchemy series, where we're beginning to look into that sleep space, what happens in that sleep space, which is much bigger than sleep. You start to find that those animals are all in that strata of consciousness and layers of consciousness, if you would, fifth dimensional, multi-dimensional world that we're kind of stepping into. When you begin to play in that vibrational layer, all those animals are there, and more. Many more. And so this space of, they're leaving, they're caught in fires and floods, is something that's happening to everybody at plus or minus levels. So you basically bless them and kind of move on, is the way to look at that.
Jim, this one is from Catherine. How does AI fit into all of this?
One of the challenges that humanity is having is the nature of technology, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, new technologies, various aspects of computer generation that we're playing with are beyond the average human being's ability to grasp. And so you've got this massive shift of technologies that we're buying in terms of consumerism, the doorbell that talks to you and you can look through and see who's there. That's artificial intelligence at a very simple level. But when you begin to have this all expand, it starts to be overwhelming to the average person. Part of the challenges that we're dealing with is that the technology is outstripping the ability of the average person to grasp it. That's one part of it. There's a bigger part of it in relationship to the spirituality that we started this conversation with. There is an aspect of humanity that is evolving. One of the aspects of what we call artificial intelligence is very simple, first generation, I'm going to call it, I don't have another reference to it, of how the soul thinks. See, the soul knows everything all at one time. And as you begin to look at how everything has evolved so far, humanity, one of the things that you can, well, let me do it this way. Every creation, every invention that mankind has come up with technologically exists within the physical body, exists within your consciousness. You know how to play at all of these different technologies. There's an aspect of memory chips. Well, the memory system is not a chip as we would define a chip, but it is very much the construct and the framework of how artificial intelligence, let's call it the thinking mind aspect of the soul, functions. So you've watched evolution, you've watched technological evolution, and particularly you've watched it very much accelerating. And this acceleration is completely in line and compatible with this shifting in consciousness that we're currently experiencing. So future humans, let's stay out of chip implants and things like that. Let's not define how the technology works. But the ability for the new human, and you're watching these new humans and the kids that are coming up in the 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old level right now, they think differently. They're functioning differently. Their grasp of coding computers, as an example, is off the charts. You look at some of these studies that 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds are put into a computer class, and it's as if they just completely understand it. There's no learning curve. They're just simply stepping into it. That's the new human functioning in a brain that is AI oriented. Now, again, stay out of the chip implants and all of the noise that could be created out of what was just said. But that new human is already being created. That new human was being created starting in 1987 with the shift in consciousness that occurred back then. So artificial intelligence is going to begin to be something where right now, can it be used for bad things? Yeah. Can it be used for really brilliant things? Yeah. And there's a point where there's going to be a spiritual, the nature of spirit is well-being. And so right now where we're at a crossroads of how do you choose, and we call that ethical or moral. These kids are coming up and there is no ethical or moral consideration in their space. There just is, I'm going to call it the right set of choices: well-being, respect, dignity, co-creation, cooperation. See, that's that fifth dimensional space that is being created. They live in it. And as they evolve and begin to know themselves at even a greater level, because they haven't absorbed their next level yet, meaning a 7-year-old has not absorbed its 8-year-old level yet, or its 12-year-old level. Those are all laid into the aura, the energetic field around the body. So as they mature or begin to know themselves, morals, ethics is not a question that the majority are going to have. There's going to be some that are going to go off into this bad space or this non-ethical space. But you watch out 20 years from now, a lot of these young people will not have that moral, ethical question. They just know what is the appropriate thing to do for well-being. So, interesting place. We can talk more about AI. I think there's other questions that are going to come up on that.
Okay, Jim, here is a question from Katrin. How important is the place on Earth to be right now in these next years? I'm in the outskirts of Berlin, big city, and people keep telling me I should move to the countryside. My heart tells me that I'm exactly right here where I am, and it feels simply right.
So then stay there. You know, it's all about you, and it's all about alignment, and it's how you basically align yourself in that sense of appropriateness for you, not right or wrong, but what's appropriate for me. Now, the challenge is, and this is where Mastering Alchemy is always focused right from the very beginning, is what do you wish to create for you? How do you wish to align yourself? How do you begin to be very congruent with what is your truth and what is not your truth? And so the whole purpose of the beginning to build that platform, staying on your side of the rose, beginning to discern what is mine and what is not, and looking at Shakespeare's theater out there and recognizing it as a play, as a script, as a set of movies, but may not be your movie, and the ability to begin to discern what is mine and what is not mine, and beginning to recognize that the way we all grew up, giving seniority to those out there, mom, dad, teacher, minister, etc., and then doing what they said because they said, that's all changing. And so when you can basically say, they are telling me to do something different, but my heart is telling me this is the right place, I'd suggest you listen to that heart space and then observe the world around you to choose appropriately for yourself.
Jim, this one is from Aaron, who's also online right now. How do you see the economy changing in regards to climate change? Will jobs be totally shifted to an older way of community, barter, trade?
So there's a couple pieces to that question. You're watching something happen that is really pretty monumental. It's happening very rapidly, even though it's easy to say it's not happening fast enough at all. And that is, you're watching corporations recognize climate shift is necessary. Climate change is necessary. How we approach climate is necessary. And Europe has kind of led the way with carbon taxes, just beginning to figure out how to reduce carbon emissions and basically shift it into an economic model, because everything's still playing in an economic model. So that's a big piece of this going forward. How do you basically make the capitalistic system recognize climate shift as necessary to deal with, and I've got to change what I'm doing to a different model? Well, if I'm not going to make money, then I can't make sense in changing the game, is kind of the third dimensional logic of capitalism. But with these carbon taxes and carbon credits, the way that's being set up, it's giving everybody an opportunity to make money and not lose money at the same time. It sounds contradictory, but shift into a different model that basically takes climate and climate change into account. There is beginning to be more and more stockholders that are sitting on boards of directors. 3 stockholders have been just put onto the Exxon board of directors. It is changing the direction of Exxon's, how they're going to be going. Slow, but it's changing. So you're going to see this shift. The second part of that question is money. And how do we play with money? And so one of the first things that is really necessary to understand is, what is money? So money is simply in fiat terms, a piece of paper that I give you for something, and we're in agreement of a common value. That is seriously under challenge right now, and you're watching it being challenged by digital currencies. So let's not just go to Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is kind of a fundamental structure that is creating a massive change in not only the individuals, small individuals who are basically playing the game and understand it, but you're now watching major world banks and countries begin to shift into a digital currency. The reason primarily is the debt levels are unsustainable. And we've gotten ourselves in some really big challenges. When you look at China, China has $329, let's use US dollars, of debt to every $100 of income. So when you got a 3-to-1 ratio of you owe versus you create, that's a challenge. There's ways of working with that, and the United States has worked with that for a long time. But the United States is now finding themselves in a very challenging place. In order to fix the problems that have not been fixed, the can kicked down the road, basically it's time to now deal with these. Primarily, it's this shift of consciousness that is bringing everything to the surface. So whether it's in social structures like Black Lives Matters, or whether it's in economic structures as the basic white male doesn't have a job anymore, and how do I deal with that, and how do you start putting this all together, and how do I fix roads and bridges and the different bandwidth programs in terms of internet services. How do I bring that all into a fixed place? Really big dollars. That's that $3.5 trillion you're hearing people talk about. So when you add $3.5 trillion to a debt level and you're stretched, you are dancing on thin ice. And so there's all kinds of considerations being brought forth. Then when you add the political imbalance into it, the odds of it being done correctly, even if it was assumed the best of intentions, is going to be questionable how it's going to turn out. There's more to that question, but let's see where the other questions go from here.
Jim, this next one is from Katharina in Hamburg, Germany. Wow. And Katharina's in level 2. By creating my ideal living environment, say in the tetrahedron, do I create the same environment for others at the same time?
So creating for others without their consent is kind of usually challenging. Creating for and with others when they are in agreement has a lot more possibilities. But one of the pieces of what you're all doing in Mastering Alchemy is, first and foremost, and we talked about this in Park Bench a lot, 100% for me, 100% of service to others. And if that 100% for me is not understood or begun to really be absorbed and created, 100% giving to yourself, having for yourself, then the ability of influencing others and bringing a level of consensus and desired results begins to be more and more challenging, particularly in this time period, because there's so many different reference points and points to go, and social media points of view, and the truth is and the truth isn't. It's really hard to discern what is it that I can do to make a contribution. And so becoming congruent in yourself with what it is that you want to be for yourself, being happy, being excited, being creative, being able to be available for others and away from that excitement is really a desirable place. The other part of beginning to give to yourself is the level of light that's available to you today is greater than it's really ever been before. And that's hard to see when you're looking at all the noise and the disruption. But, you know, we've talked consistently, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a minute, is that shift of consciousness where there's a fifth dimension, multi-dimensional state of well-being that's being created in this third dimension, survival level, fear-based, I need to get mine because I'm better than you type of mentality, those two segmentations are expanding significantly. The opportunity in this space of well-being, giving to yourself and then reflecting it outward, is something that is pretty necessary in being in a state of well-being for yourself these days. Because if you can't get clear about you and what you're all about and how you can be happy yourself and then assist others in being happy, whatever form that takes, versus holding my attention on what I don't want and watching wars and watching animals die and watching forest fires and watching floods, etc., really pretty dramatic on the nervous system of the body when you give your attention to what's not correct or not what's out of balance. And so the space of balancing yourself and then giving to others is going to become more and more important as what was begins to be more of a challenging place to continue to be in.
Let's see. Hold on. Okay, this one is from Mark in Vancouver, British Columbia. I purchased the Project Park Bench series. Please talk about what is accomplished with this work. Will there be more? It has changed me in so many ways. Amazing.
Yeah, so Park Bench was really successful. And what most people would take from that is I participated, I found myself in vibrations and sense of happiness and well-being, and my energy change was the consistent response from most everybody. There were over 5,000 people who participated in that. It was really successful. What was most successful, besides it shifting each individual into a set of opportunities for themselves, most of those opportunities are still sitting in your space but not integrated or understood as yet. So that's a positive thing, because as you begin to raise up in your own well-being, the concepts and considerations and thoughts and different configurations of how things could happen, belief systems that you haven't considered before, start to make themselves available to you. But one of the biggest things that happened and is continuing to happen, and the reason that Park Bench went on for, what was that, 15, 16, 18 months?
It was 20 sessions.
20 sessions. And then we paused. And we paused right at the time of the 2021 summer solstice, effectively. And everything was setting up that 2021 summer solstice, summer in the northern hemisphere. And one of the pieces that kept being referred to in all of that work was the creation of the architecture, the landscape, and the environment of a new realm of consciousness. And you know, you can finish a session and you can walk away and you say, gee, I really feel good, that was really good. And then your attention shifts and you go about your business in another way. And then when it comes to really grasping, I sat down, I participated with 5,000 people in creating a new realm of consciousness for the world to step into. That the rational mind has a hard time grasping that, holding on to that. But that's what you did. And in that space of the park bench, the creation of a new realm of consciousness by a group consciousness putting it together, group consciousness being all of you, there was a significant shift that occurred, that is still occurring. You put it in place, you create it in the ethers, in the kind of wherever you pull consciousness from, a construct, an architecture, a landscape, an environment, a very delineated, well-constructed set of creations, founded in respect, in beauty, alignment with the smile of the Creator in the heart, very clear about opportunities. So that's in place. And then with the waves of light that came in approximately on the summer solstice, that wave of light was huge, is huge, and it's still unfolding. And these waves are like watching flowers just unfold, or you're watching a brilliant cloud begin to just continuously expand and grow. This particular construct that you've put together, respect, dignity, that vibrant pink light, that Christed golden light that was all laid into the environment. When these waves came in on the summer solstice, they were extremely opportunistic. They amplified the opportunity. I kept referring to it as when you get excited and happy in these waves of light, it's like you'll leap forward. You jump over something that no longer has to even be taken into your consideration. But the vibration of joy, which is a word all my life I could never understand. I couldn't find that vibration. And in this level of this wave of light that's now very playing out, joy became anchored into that architecture. And it amplified the architecture. And so we're on pause. We're not at an end. We're at a beginning point of creating that realm of consciousness. And so somewhere I'm suspecting towards the end of going into the winter solstice, probably that's the place it looks, we'll put together another 4 or 5 events, 4 or 5 segments of Park Bench to both bring you into present time and bring you more anchored into that architectural construct of a new realm of consciousness. It's also something where there's a lot of work being done, I mentioned this earlier, in the sleep state. Now, the sleep state is just not where you go to bed at night and go somewhere and come back in the morning and finish your day or start your next day. The sleep state is really very broad, with amazing opportunities. And so these opportunities in this new wave of light are all about reconstructing you. You reconstructing you. You beginning to recognize, oh, I never thought of that. Oh, I never considered that. And all of a sudden, this electromagnetic field, now this is going to be funny, I haven't said it this way before. These electromagnetic fields from the sun are to a great extent what's bringing the opportunity into your realities. These electromagnetic fields from the sun are also what is very disruptive to the third dimensional reality that we've been playing in. So you're getting an enhancement, an opportunity, and you're getting a disruption in the old status quo. So you're really being moved out of what was into what is. The key is, can you do it with joy and excitement and clear observation, or do you do it from looking over your shoulder hoping that wave's coming that's not going to bite you in the butt? That's a very clear choice. And if you can stay on the side of opportunity, standing on that platform, my side of the rows, in the center of my head, observing before I choose, you're going to have a very different result than the one looking over your shoulder.
Jim, we're having a lot of really good questions here. When you all ask your question, it might be helpful if you let us know if you were a level 1, 2, 3 grad person, or if you didn't take Mastering Alchemy at all. That will kind of help Jim answer your question according to the tools that you have on your tool bench.
Yeah.
This one is from Janine. Could you shed light on a changing construct I'm noticing related to sexuality? Like more teenagers are identifying as LGBTQ, is this part of a bigger spiritual shift, or is this part of a cultural shift? It's culturally present and growing in my daughter's middle school. There appears to be a statistical spike in people identifying as LGBTQ.
Yeah, the answer is both. Is it cultural? Is it spiritual? The answer is both. And it is part of this whole shift. If you look kind of at a bigger picture you've been watching for some time, if you look in particularly developed countries, Japan, United States, Europe, you have two things going on. You have significant aging. Baby boomers are now at that level of ending their life. And the new kids coming in are very different concepts, different considerations, different everything. One in those countries, particularly China, Japan, United States, Europe, United States, the least of the four, you're watching birth rates drop. They have been dropping. You're watching attitudes change. Kids just simply not interested in sex. The kids are simply basically saying they either want to work, or many now today are beginning to say they don't want to work. They don't like this whole thing of 12-hour day workspace. They don't like the rat race of trying to be ahead. They don't like the old game. And so you're watching real clear decisions being made about marriage, about children, about sexuality. And a lot of these kids are basically coming in this under 20, that may not be correct, but somewhere in that range, where they're wired differently. They aren't like older folks in terms of how we grew up in our own sexuality, in the constructs of how we even looked at sexuality, which were tremendously religiously driven. So you had the 60s where you had started changes, 80s you had a set of changes, then other things began to change. Then you had social media. These kids today are basically defining themselves and their sexuality and their androgynies and their sense of identity very differently than you and I have done. And so that's going to continue. There's right across the board, bisexual, gay, lesbian, transgender, all of these are a way of the future. And where that goes, how that goes, is not clear. It's both a cultural thing, it's driven by social media in some ways, but be really clear, it is a spiritual reconfiguration of how things happen.
Jim, this one is from Aaron. What's the best way to navigate the negative people and forces that are bumping against my reality?
So take level 1 in mastering alchemy. So what is that whole set of teachings is all about? I mean, level 1 is really a simple body of work that basically gives you choices. So what are those choices? How do I define my energy versus the energy of the world around me? How do I create a platform that I can step out of fear and anxiety into a place and take a breath and really find the vibrations of words like certain, capable, seniority, gracious, give me a sense of being able to command my presence, not at the expense of anybody else, but just simply be able to observe and then choose an action rather than finding I'm in reaction, I'm in fear, I'm in uncertainty, I don't know what to do. As we go forward, there is going to be a lot of reasons to not know what to do. And so if you can create that sense of stability and choice without having to run it through fear and uncertainty, you're more likely going to make better choices. And so really understanding what it is to know my truth in this situation and act accordingly is really a necessity, I think, for going forward. And because there's going to be, I mean, look around. The levels of fear, the level of good decision making on the part of politicians, on the part of corporations, on the part of the world around you that's still dealing from philosophies that are now 60 years old. These new kids are coming up, they're not having anything to do with it. And so there is this mismatch. And when you've got that much uncertainty in the world, the opportunity for certain direction to come about is questionable. And so the more you can find your own space in this, and again, I'll just point to level 1, those are tools about how to build that platform, how to simply choose observing what's in front of me and then having a answer that best supports me.
Jim, this one is from Denny, who's also in level 2. Are the energies of chi or ki represented in light with the shift of consciousness?
Yes. So chi, let's call that life force, prana, energetics, very much available to you. And so it's part of these waves of joy and waves of appreciation, and basically recognizing these two stratas of consciousness and moving into a place that I just described, a platform of well-being, the ability to observe and choose, the ability to, recognize, oh, there's a train coming. I'm going to step off the tracks rather than go, oh my God, and get hit by the train. Those levels of choice are what are going to allow that energy, that life force energy, to come into the body. I was just telling Roxanne, I did a long bike ride yesterday, about 60-mile bike ride, and it was fine, but I got tired at one point, which actually surprised me is where I was working. And I got to the place where one of the things you all did in Park Bench that is not yet understood, but you created a lot of attention and vibration in that pink light, that level of Christed love, and you amplified it into and created a cellular vibration in love. And so I was riding the bike and I said, yeah, I'm tired. So I actually brought my attention into all of that and then drew this life force energy into those cells. And it was amazing. I lit up. I mean, my body got warm and somewhat tingly. It got comfortable. I got brighter. I got energized. I thought, damn, this is good. Somebody should teach this.
Oh, wait.
So absolutely. But see, the key is not thinking about it, not going, oh, yes, I have chi running through my space. It's an actionable choice. It's something you do very clearly, very specifically, in bringing your attention to it and allowing it to be in your presence. And so, yes, it's not only has value, it's absolutely necessary to run that life force energy into the body.
Jim, this one's from Beverly. I recognize her name, so she's involved in a program. I'm not sure which one. I keep hearing about the plasma field and how it is pre-matter, holding a consistent frequency. Do you have any information about that, and does it figure into the new color frequencies?
Yes and yes. So I don't know how to say it fits into the color frequencies, but it does fit into a stabilizing, elevating field of light. So there's a level in these plasmic fields that you are drawing from in terms of creating that fifth dimensional, multidimensional realm of consciousness that the Park Bench is very focused on. So you're drawing a non-specific energy into form that begins to create a stabilization of this new level of thinking, this new level of consciousness. It has, again, a lot to do with the sun and the change of the magnetic fields in the sun. And it has a lot to do with, right now, the shifting, hear this really simple, the shifting of the poles. Now, so if you have an illusion that there's a North Pole and a South Pole, that doesn't exist anymore. The South Pole is in the Pacific Ocean over here closer to Australia. The North Pole is now over in Siberia, and they're shifting. And so that's part of where I said earlier the internal magnetic field of the Earth is starting to have a little bit of a wobble. its poles shifting. Now, that doesn't mean the Earth's going to turn over anytime soon, so don't go there. But it's beginning to create a different vibrational level. One of the things that will happen when the Earth actually does shift, most likely out of your awareness by a long time, but when it happens, it's going to move in its orbit. It's simply going to move into a different orbital field. Still very symmetrical around the Earth, but in a different plane of energy. These plasma fields that are building up are basically allowing for that to ultimately happen.
Jim, this one is from NJ, and they're asking, what is the most efficient way to facilitate healing now, capital letters, now? What changed from, say, 10 years ago?
Well, my primary answer to that is you. And so it's a matter of, see, healing in its simplest manner is somebody doesn't do something to somebody else unless you physically got a damage. A doctor goes in, surgically does something, changes things around. But on an energetic level, an emotional level, on a mental level, on a levels of vibrations of where depression or anxiety or things like that, or just the belief I'm not okay, that belief physically begins to damage the body. So one of the things that happens is healers, Reiki practitioners generate a lot of energy, and put hands on healers generate a lot of energy. But what you're really doing is you are raising your energy vibrational field to hold the vibration, allowing the other person to match it and then absorb it. Very mechanical healing. Healers are wonderful folks. They're doing great things, but you're really doing a great thing for yourself by beginning to recognize, how do I hold a vibration in my space that alters a vibration in somebody else's space if chosen. But at the same time, the more you play at that is you begin to recognize, how do I do this for myself? So that's one of the great opportunities of people who play in the healing field. But you can't heal somebody else. If they don't choose to match that vibration that you're presenting, then that healing doesn't occur in somebody's space, no matter how vibrant it is. I remember Saint Germain explaining a story, which is a little bit off the topic, but not really, where he said to Napoleon, you do not want to do this. And Napoleon, in his own ego, said, no, I'm going to do this. And he said, Saint Germain said to him, I'm going to show you. You need to see this. I'm communicating this to you from a place that is not me and you standing in this room. And so Saint Germain stepped behind the sheet, and this magnificent, brilliant white light, Saint Germain said, he presented to Napoleon and basically said, I'm giving you this choice. If you do this versus do that, the world will be a very different place. Right here, what you do will change the direction of the world. And Napoleon didn't believe Saint Germain, even though he created this vibrant, brilliant field of white light. And so Saint Germain said, one of the reasons that you are having the experience you're having today in terms of moving through this shift in time, moving through this shift that you're now experiencing, and the awkwardness of it, the challenges of it, the pain of it, the fear of it, is directly because Napoleon didn't believe what I showed him. So kind of a story somewhat off that topic, but not so much. So if you hold that light in front of somebody and begin to simply talk in excitement, talk in possibilities, talk in joy, they will rise up to meet that light, and that healing will occur.
This one is from Melinda, who's in level 3, year 3. Is the consciousness of the sun evolving as well?
Absolutely. Consciousness of everything is evolving. And so the sun is getting ready to go through its own evolution. The earth is going through its own evolution. Gaia is leaving. That's not Gaia's not abandoning, Gaia's evolving. And there is an aspect of consciousness that will come in and be the equivalent to Gaia at the next level of the Earth's incarnations.
This one is from Jonice. How or does this shift relate to Atlantis?
It relates. There was a time of Atlantis was in a slightly different vibrational field than we are right now. So it would be, if you wanted to see Atlantis, you have to change the channel. It's like going from channel 4 to channel 5. There's a different movie on channel 4 than there was on channel 5, if I can make that simple. Atlantis went through a period of time in this same incarnation of the Earth. So let me define periods of the Earth where that magnetic pole shifts. And so it's each one of those is an evolution. Virtually everything is wiped out when that happens. I mean, life basically goes into a state of hibernation. And when that thaw occurs, it basically is a whole different evolutionary vibration. That's one way of looking at the physical Earth. There's another way of looking at the physical Earth, which we're all sitting in right now, which is this shift. And those that choose to stay in that 3D, I'm better than you, fear, domination, greed, imposition, all of those kind of layers are simply going to, and they're choosing not to evolve, they're going to disappear with this vibrational channel. It's like the story on Channel 5 is coming to a conclusion, and there will be another series next year. Come back and watch this next series, kind of the world that the universe is saying, and that next series is going to be well-being. The whole purpose of third dimension has been satisfied. The door has been closed. It's not going to happen again. The movie is over. And so how do you choose? Do you stay here and fight for your limitations, or do you simply begin to step into this vibrational field of shifting consciousness into well-being, happy, enjoyment, co-creation, cooperation? What is there not to like in that? What's not to like is, I'm afraid. I don't know if I can make it. And so let me go back to Mastering Alchemy. The whole purpose of these tools are transitionary. If you can basically own yourself, like yourself, appreciate yourself, begin to be at ease with yourself, allowing opportunity to come to you, the ability to step into this consciousness is very available. So how do you choose? How do you choose?
Here's a question, Jim, from Sajit. Are you saying that the new Earth is guided by a different being, not Gaia?
No, I'm not. I'm saying that Gaia is very involved. The elementals are hugely involved, and thank you all very much. You've amplified their capacity to be successful. That's another question, if you'd like. But Gaia, there is no dislocation in this whole process. You aren't being dislocated. You're just moving from one level of consciousness to another level of consciousness, in the meantime playing in your own movie. And so Gaia, let's keep it in the same context, is simply been playing in this whole movie, a movie massive times more interesting, complex than you and me as a human being can even begin to comprehend, and very successful. And now it's time to, let's call it, graduate and go on to another adventure. There's another set of energetics and consciousness that are stepping into this role, and they're not here as yet, but they're here. It's kind of like apprentices. Oh, they didn't like that word. It's an evolution that's going on, and so Gaia's fine, happy, appreciate you. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that one.
This one is from Jan. Isn't life on Earth all about our spiritual growth? Isn't that why we're here?
Yeah, purely 100%, that's why you're here, at that level. But now you step it down and, you came here to play a game, and you came here to evolve yourself, and you came here to be of service. So when you pushed yourself to the front of the line and demanded of the Creator, send me, the Creator said, hey, let me explain this to you. You're going to put this bag over your head. You're going to forget who you are. You're going to forget who I am. And you're going to wander around in this darkness and try to find your way home. And you said, hot damn, how deep into the darkness should I jump? And the Creator said, knock yourself out. Some of you done a really pretty good job of jumping into that. But it's time to go home. It's time to go home. You are smart enough, you are capable enough, and you are knowledgeable enough to go home. And so you're just unwinding this last part of this journey. And so that's where we're playing here. And how do you basically begin to become conscious enough to step out of this game? So those of you playing Mastering Alchemy, started with, can you build that platform that allows you to step out of the game and observe it just for a moment, even just, whoa, this work is too much, this argument and relationship is too much, this, what they just said is too much, I've got to step away. But if you can step away into this platform of your own creation, well-being, take a breath, and then recognize, wow, that person's in a lot of pain today. When they just screamed at me, it's their pain that's talking, it's not, I'm doing something wrong. That's a massive shift in perception, if that can be recognized from that standpoint. But that platform is only the beginning, playing in your space only the beginning, and you start to take it to the next steps where you begin to move to that building the light body. And the light body is the beginning of a whole nother game. You arrive at the starting line, not at the finishing line, but you're wired completely different to basically step into your own consciousness at a full level in the body. You don't have to die to go home.
Jim, this one is from Laura, who lives in Ohio and is in level 1. Could you talk more about the elementals?
Sure. So the elementals, in this context of where we are today, the elementals were created with one specific really purpose in mind. And they were created so that when all of the great beings, the avatars and the Elohim and all the others wanted to play in physicalness, that when they came into the game of physicalness, they didn't forget they were a fully Christed being of light. Christed being is not a religion here, or not about a man. It's about an aspect of consciousness that is reflected from Creator. And so when the fall of consciousness, let me see, I want to say that, when the wobbles begin to occur in this third dimensional space, and things like fear and anxiety and words like that began to be felt as vibrations. They've never felt those things before when these beings came into physicalness, and then they began to get caught up in, let's say, anxiety, because they never felt it. And that was not a vibration in well-being, anxiety. So the elementals were created in physicalness, in form, gas, air, water, the ethers, the earth, the fire. And they were created to reflect back to the creator beings, the avatars, the great beings of light, the Christed consciousness that they were, because they were losing their perspective. And a lot of them got lost, and a lot of them never returned to that state of consciousness. There are still great avatars who are caught in the third dimensional game. And they're kind of suspended in this game. Their fear is greater than their ability to see their own particular truth. The elementals were there to reflect back to them their truth. Interesting thing about the elemental game is the elements lost their Christed reflection at one point. The elementals lost love at one point. Oh, that's not true. The elementals were asked to give up love at one point in order for humanity to survive. Think about that. And they chose to give it up. Then they went into a tremendous place of resentment and anger and confusion. And out of that, to the question of Atlantis, they helped Atlantis be destroyed. They just said, screw you. We're not going to play this game with you. And as the Earth went through a series of shifts, and as the consciousness that de-evolved in Atlantis, because there was one great consciousness over on this side, and there was another really sinister vibration on this side. And the sinister vibration was destroying not only Atlantis, but a lot of the whole Earth. And so when the fall of Atlantis happened and the balance could have been brought back into place by the elementals stepped on the sidelines. That's a much bigger story. It's a magnificent story. It sounds odd, but it's magnificent. But what came about in this period of time, and by a lot of you playing and mastering alchemy, the ability to give love back to the elementals, the ability to give that ability to reflect Christ consciousness back to the elementals was done by you. And it's going to make a significant difference in how the Earth actually unwinds into this next state of consciousness. Because without that, that third dimensional ending that will come will have been very different. So, story for another day, though.
Jim, there's two people online, Patricia and Michelle, who are chatting back and forth between each other. They're talking about what going home means. Could you talk about that?
So, the first place when we start talking about this in the energy of just the thought, it's time to go home. You can't not hear that. You can't really fully use your rational mind to go, oh, well, that's nice. What does that mean? If you really just hear that, you're going to hear it from the heart. It's a message that cuts through everything, right to who you are in the heart. Now, can you have it? That's another story. But it goes right to that space of the heart. And so going home, in the simplest terms, is something you can do partially, in an evolutionary way right now. You can begin to simply know yourself, love yourself, appreciate yourself, like yourself, be pleased with yourself, give to yourself. Now, that's all going home. That's all I'm beginning to be aware of well-being, joy, laughter, appreciation, co-creation, respect, dignity, integrity. I'm recognizing myself. And see, those vibrations, those are not third dimensional vibrations. Respect, gratitude do not exist in a third dimensional world. You have to simply elevate your consciousness to experience gratitude. Now, you try to feel gratitude when you're angry. You have to step out of anger to step into gratitude. You cannot be in gratitude and be angry at the same time. It doesn't work. And so when you begin to start to have this aspect of well-being, appreciation, all of those words, something else begins to happen. And again, I'm going to go back to Mastering Alchemy. You learn in level 2, how do I begin to let go of all of my not okay? And how do I begin to recognize that I'm of this world, but I'm in this world, but I'm not of this world. And so you start to stay on your side of the rows and watch humanity, and you watch the third dimensional game, and you begin to see it, but not put your finger into that light socket. Something happens. You begin to absorb well-being. And then from that place, you start to find that you can reconstruct yourself. You put that mental, emotional body back together. They were never meant to be two bodies. It was always meant to be one. But from one, you get to think and perceive differently, and et cetera, et cetera. Those who play Mastering Alchemy understand. But choosing into this space of going home is about evolving out of that third dimensional space, liking yourself, and then beginning to have an awareness of something very specific. I get very quiet and everything comes to me. Huge piece of information, and even a more huge experience when you start to recognize that you manage drawing everything to you. In that context, what is home? How do I align? How do I begin to think from the higher self? How do I merge the higher self, the oversoul, and me sitting here in this space and elevating my awareness into that consciousness, going home? And so, complicated? No. Actually, it's ridiculously simple. Easy? Not necessarily. Simple? Yes. So, but it's becoming very available. And it's a matter of, some people will not like this, but it's a matter of becoming selfish. Let me define my word selfish. Selfish has two ends to the stick. The end that says, I'm going to step on you, take advantage of you, use you to get ahead. Only selfish people that play that like that, and they don't really like it. They don't know what else to do. The other end of the stick is give to myself, have for myself, enjoy myself. That's selfish, but in that space you start to recognize, I have the ability to give to others. I have the ability to hold a level of light for others to step into. So giving to yourself from a selfish point of view is what you're all about from the heart space. So it's an evolution at this point, but it is a choice. And if you keep looking at the world as you're watching it evolve, it's going to be very difficult to step more and more into that choice of finding well-being. One last thing about this. If you ask yourself, does putting my attention on watching the television add value to me in any way, shape, or form? Can I do anything about what I'm watching? And does it make me feel good? And if the answer is no, which is generally the case, turn off the television. If it's not something you can influence, and it's not something that has comfortable value to you, why do you put your attention on it? What value is it to keep bringing all that fear into my body? So when you start stepping away from looking at all the things and worrying about and being fear about, because there's a lot of things out there, and recognize, if I can't do something about it, if I can't improve it, add to value, even though it's really not a good thing, forest fires, climate change, if there's nothing you can do about it, then don't run it through your space. Because the more you get into allowing things you can't influence to be outside of your space, the more room you have to begin to recognize what you do have value to do and how you can be influential in changing this world as it's unfolding. The end.
Nice. Here's a question I can answer. This is from Henry in Sweden. I'm late for signing up for level 2. Is it still possible? And Henry, you're not too late. It's going to stay in the store until Tuesday, the 31st. And if you don't want to take it this time, it's offered 4 times a year. So the next time is in November, and then February, and then May. So just information. This question is way up here, so give me a second. Gerda from level 2 in Florida. Is this shift the beginning of the two Earths?
Yes. Oh no. So let's take, it's too defined. So let's call it two stratas of consciousness rather than two Earths. Because as soon as you get into two Earths, you're dealing with physical bodies and how's it going to divide and too much. So is it going to shift into two states of consciousness? Yes. Is it this third dimensional state that I keep referring to that holds fear, anxiety, resentment, greed, domination? Third dimension. The interesting thing about that is the people who are playing in that game, they don't see you. They cannot see you. They're so wound up in that level of survival and fear that you're invisible standing in their presence. When you begin to bring your attention into this state of well-being, the ability to start shifting yourself begins to be very available, as I've been saying, but you see them. And so this is part of the evolution, is can you see them and allow them to be there? Very challenging, especially when it's your own family in some way, quite often. But can you allow them to be there? And can you get to the place where you can give to them when they can have it, and when they can't have it, you can allow them to continue about their path? And that's a very challenging point in this whole evolution, is letting people go. And it's not comfortable, it's not exciting, it's hard to do, and yet if they can't have what you have and you keep staying there intending to give and give and give and give, then basically you're staying at that vibrational level that they have brought you down to. It's hard for people playing in Mastering Alchemy, playing this evolution, because you keep getting rid of the things that are unlike you. You get rid of the baggage, you get rid of you start to choose, I used to hang out with those people, but I don't find it interesting anymore. Then they disappear from your reality. But shifting into this status, the stature of 5D is a challenge, because you get to see 3D. But the more you can put your attention into that center point of the heart and turn off the television, the more you're going to start to find the ability to step into that realm that we're creating, that architecture that you're creating. It's going to become more and more available.
Jim, this one is from Yasmin in Turkey. Thank you for sharing your time on Sunday with us. Could you please talk about time? It seems like something huge has happened. The days are passing by, however, the calendar isn't moving. I can't really explain what I'm feeling.
Yeah, so time is a really interesting thing. It's changing. Roxanne and I say this almost every night, we're going to bed again. Weren't we just here? And the answer is, yeah, you were just there. So time in a third dimensional way, very linear, past, present, future, then you die. Time in where you're starting to play in this fourth, fifth, multi-dimensional space exists in present time. And you can put your attention into a past, you can put your attention into a future, but when you're in present time, the past and the future just become concepts or history. They're not laden with emotion. They're not locked into, I can never change because that happened to me. You understand that when you fight in Mastering Alchemy. But what's more interesting to me right now is there's numbers of constructions of time. There's linear time, there's circular time, there's simultaneous time. Simultaneous time, for those playing in Mastering Alchemy particularly, is beginning to be something that is understandable as we get to this different points along the way. And it's a place where you can put your attention and begin to experience, let me say it this way, what you call past lives and future lives, all are happening simultaneously. And it's not so much about when you say in past life, was I the king or the janitor, or was I the queen or the prostitute? You're really not interested in what the life was. What you're going to start to find you're interested in is, I'm having this experience, I'm having this consideration, I'm wanting to create something. And when you get into this really quiet present time space, you basically ask all aspects of yourself. Any of you ever experienced this? How did you do it? You're going to be amazed. These answers wind up sitting there, and a lot of times it's like, oh, I never thought of that, never considered that. Or, well, that's kind of weird, but I can see how that works. It's some aspect of you who's had that experience already, just simply saying, yeah, I did this once and this is how it worked. Now, that sounds kind of lame in a way. It's how it works. You're not going to believe me until you begin to play in simultaneous time. Then it gets really interesting, because you start to recognize that the 3D game I'm playing over here is simply a movie. It's a movie I decided I was going to experience for whatever set of reasons, and it has a starting point and an ending point. But when you start to play in simultaneous time, the physics changes, the rules change, the quantum constructs begin to be much more available than Newtonian physics. It's somewhat confusing, to be really honest with you. I find it confusing. That's not a bad word. It's simply, oh, I thought this should work this way and it didn't work that way. And then you sit there with it and you sit there with it, and it's like, oh, this is how this works. And so the answer exists where the question is asked. That will become more and more real to you.
Jim, this one is from Christina, who's completed level 3. What will happen to those who choose to remain in third dimensional consciousness?
Well, everybody's going home. So everybody's going home. The third dimensional game is over, complete. It's been, the movie's wrapped, and so you're just playing out your roles. So in the simplest terms, they'll die. I'll play out my game until my game's over, or until I can't play any more part of it, and then they'll leave the body. And so that's the simplest answer I can give you. Will they become any happier? Maybe, if they choose. Will they continue to argue for their limitations, live in fear? A lot will. A lot will. But everybody has a movie, and it's their movie. And they're fully competent, just like you are fully competent in the space that you are a spiritual being. No difference. So we're playing out our own movies, and how we're choosing to navigate it really is completely 100% on our terms.
This one is from Gina. Can you expand upon any changes for using the Mastering Alchemy tools brought on by this shift of consciousness?
Yeah, I can. So the two things. So the classwork, the sessions that happen every week, those words were spoken in the past. The energy and the information that those words convey are constantly changing, evolving, upgrading. The message is the same set of words, although I've gone back and listened to some of the sessions, and I swear I never said that, as well as I never heard Metatron, Yeshua have said that. So, but basically, let's assume the words are the words, but the energy on the words is carrying elevated messages in present time. The other part of that is the body of work is how do you build this living light body? How do you step out of the third dimensional noise? How do you begin to manage yourself? How do you begin to change the use of energetics to both heal yourself, change the nervous system, alter the brains, understand the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th chakras particularly, and how to use them. and then how to integrate 7 layers of the light body into everything you just did. That's the coursework of Mastering Alchemy. In and around the coursework is this whole evolutionary change that we're going through that we've been speaking about for the last hour. And so you are beginning to have the capacity to choose differently. And as you choose differently, the tools, the skills, the abilities that you've been developing in the classwork begin to be applied in a more expansive way in many cases. So you learn how to do this, and then all of a sudden you're given a new choice. Well, I can apply this to this. And it's in that quiet curiosity that simply says, this is interesting. I would like to experience. I would like to enjoy myself. I would like to have fun. I would like to experience new levels of beauty. And then simply let that information absorb into that space and create what it is you want to create. It's that simple. However, it's not easy because I argue with myself, can I really do that, etc., etc. Yeah, you can really do that when you get out of your own way. So,
This one is from Olga. How does the change of the magnetic fields of the Earth and the Sun affect humans?
significantly. So, what you know as sunspots on the sun, for example, is just literally a magnetic field that's a positive pole and a negative pole, and you get this arcing that gets created. What sunspots are on the sun are what we call low and high pressure systems on Earth. And so as these magnetic fields shift, there's the magnetic field that goes around the Earth, but at the latitudes there are also these little arcing fields that create electromagnetic dynamics. That's a scientific experience. They're constantly changing the electrical balance of the Earth. The electrical structure that is held in the atmosphere is a function of high and low pressure zones. There are functions of high and low pressure zones affect the winds, the jet streams, everything that's going on, but they affect you. And so when you wind up having a low pressure zone, it affects the emotions in a way that is one sort of feelings. A high pressure zone, you begin to find a whole set of other feelings. So the emotional body is affected by these electromagnetic fields dramatically. As this wobble is beginning to appear in the center of the Earth, and when you really hear this clearly, the wobble is like 1/1,000,000th of an inch. So we're not talking about massive swings in terms of how the Earth is shifting. It's just there's a change. It's like you may find yourself saying, the weather just changed. It just got colder. Or there's a rain coming. Well, how do you know? The sky's blue. No, there's a rain coming. And 10 minutes later, it rains. How do you know that? I just know. And that's what's beginning to happen in these magnetic fields to the emotional body. As I talked about the AI shifts in how you're perceiving, the emotional body is shifting too. The ability to begin to experience, let's say a word like joy. Maybe there's a better word. I'll find a better word. A word like joy. So do you know what joy is? Oh yeah, I know what joy is. Have you ever felt joy? Okay, let's just say yes, I've felt joy. But joy is a really deep field of energy that has multiple choices to experience within it. A word like ease. Everybody goes, oh yeah, I know what ease is. No, you don't. Ease is really deep with lots of variations available to you that are passed over because I don't have an attention span, or I don't have the capacity, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th chakra, to hold an awareness. When you start to put your attention into vibrations like joy, ease, well-being, universes live inside these. choices of how to experience yourself you've never even thought of are in these vibrational fields. So, I lost the context of the question. That's okay. So what you're beginning to have availability to choose from that quiet, focused space, as you put your attention on a vibration and then hold your attention in that vibration. The electromagnetic fields, that's where it was, of both the sun and the earth are starting to shift in such ways that you are opening awareness into these multidimensional fields of consciousness. It takes some practice. So there's no free ride here. There's work involved. And work is really a hard word because it's not work. It's just sitting in, can you be quiet and allow the experience to come to you. And that's what's now beginning to be easier and easier. Simple, but it's easier in this multidimensional space that we're starting to play with. And so those of you playing Mastering Alchemy, that's what this is taking you to. And it's fascinating, those of you playing in the work completed after Mastering Alchemy, the whole nature of you as that spiritual being where you're playing, right now we are going to put a lot of attention into these attributes you have. Words like, let's just keep it simple, well-being. You're going to be able to put your attention into a vibration and start to recognize the you that exists in that vibration in a much deeper level. Is this interesting?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Jim, this question is from Liz. Are the locations of the Earth's chakras changing as well in conjunction with the Christ in matrix, ley lines, etc.?
Yes, everything about the Earth is changing. The whole electromagnetic field is changing. The ley lines, I haven't asked that question to myself. It doesn't look like the ley lines are that specific in this change. They carry information. I have to think about that one. We'd have to look into it a little bit more. But as the field changes, the consciousness of the Earth is going to increase. So your ability to tap into that consciousness, okay, so the ley lines. So as you hold that heart space, as you sit in that quiet center point of the heart, the ability to align with the Earth, working with the elementals, and being able to amplify love into those ley lines is very much the shifting of the Earth going forward. Interesting, I hadn't seen that before. So that's what they just showed me. So it again comes down to you. You know, the archangelics have said consistently, we know all the probabilities, we know all of the possibilities, but we don't have the body. We don't have form. You have the physical body, you have the form, you are the creator being in physicalness. So we can co-create with you, but you have to simply engage the action. And so what I just said is this earlier question about chi, or life force energy running through the planet, running through you, is as you begin to, gee, the whole answer is there, it's messy. So that example I gave you about the bicycle ride and needing to really draw that energy into the body and using love where it's amplified the crystals in the body, something that is being created and will be more so in the park bench when we go forward. Those crystalline structures of love that are now in the cells are able to amplify that level of love into physicalness. I'm just telling you what they're showing me. And as you sit with the Earth, the ability to amplify the Earth is going to be you, the healer, in physicalness, reflecting to the Earth in physicalness the love you hold. Run through those ley lines. Really fascinating. I hadn't seen that one. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, good one. Jim, this one is from Zoltan, who's in level 2. Mm-hmm. Please, can you speak about the living words?
So these living words are your words. They're everything we've been saying so far. So how do you choose to hold the vibration that allows you to create? And so words like graciousness, kindness, gratitude, how does it feel when you hold those words as feelings in the body? And these vibrations are all heart words. So those in Mastering Alchemy have heard me say this before, just as a distinction. This is not 100% true, but it is a valuable reference point. Emotions have edges, feelings do not. Gratitude, well-being, happy, laughter, appreciation, no edges. Anxiety, resentment, jealous, edges. Now, not 100% true, but true for this point. So when you start to find that feelings are heart words, emotions are rational mind's constructs in order to understand what's it dealing with. There's a lot more to that statement also, but one to pay attention to. So as you start to play in the living heart words, the living vibrations of the heart, you feel good. You relax, you get out of stress. So it's in those words. And so a moment ago I said these words are really deep. They're deep because they're who you are as a spiritual being. So when you start putting your attention into gratitude or into the vibrations of seniority, you start to find that they go very deep and a lot of understanding is available. And that's something that's now unfolding more so, is being able to go deeper into these vibrations to know yourself again.
Jim, this one is from Debbie, who's just reading the book. It doesn't look like she's taken level 1 yet. What do you do with the feelings of loneliness as I continue to evolve?
Yeah, so this is a challenge, in a simple way, in a complex way, depending on how you look at it. So, two points of reference. So many of you who are playing Mastering Alchemy, as you keep taking out the who I'm not, you keep removing many of your reference points. And as you move those reference points, it gets quieter. And you don't necessarily have new reference points in place yet. So that's one side of it. That's not your question. The place where people who are not playing in Mastering Alchemy feel lonely to a great extent is basically, I'm listening to the world. The world is telling me this is what I need to do to be happy, to be successful, to be good at what I do, to be a good wife, a good mother, a good husband, a good father, a good son. This is what I should be doing. And a lot of that doesn't really feel good to me or resonate with me. And so when I've played that game, I've been successful plus or minus, and maybe not, even though I was successful, I didn't enjoy it, or it didn't do a lot for me, it didn't stimulate me. And so we begin to pull back from what doesn't satisfy me. And there's no new reference points in that place. And so I wind up beginning to feel lonely. And if you look around the world, that's a common question that people have pretty much everywhere. The core of it, though, is I've given my attention out there looking for my well-being, and my well-being doesn't exist out there. My well-being exists in the feeling of certainty and laughter and graciousness and happy and engagement with and respect and appreciation of others. I feel good when I'm feeling good. And so in that space, you start to find a reference point. And in those reference points, the ability to step out of loneliness begins to be expansive. But at the same time, I want friends. I want to have laughter with people. And part of this shifting evolution right now is about yourself. And so it's not an easy answer. It's not a comfortable answer. But loneliness is something that is predominant on the planet. And most people also say, I'm not happy. So, well, how do you get happy? What could you do to get happy? How do you go navigate happy? And the whole purpose of mastering alchemy is to begin to find that place of, I can give to myself.
And another thing, Debbie, I'd like to just add to that, that even though you're reading the book and you haven't taken the classes, one of the first things that you learn in the book is the rose tool. And so you can take that rose tool and use it to clean out anything in your space that is uncomfortable. And so how I do it is, and this is just how I do it, you make it yours, is I create a white rose out in front of me and I say, white rose, what's the color of loneliness in my space? Or whatever it is I'm working on that day. And the rose will light up a color, blue, whatever color it is. And then you give the command to the rose to run through your space, and I do it very methodically, and because I'm that type of person. And I go up my legs and then down from my head, down my arms. And I just take that blue rose and I just sweep it around like smudging, if you've ever done sage smudging. And I collect up all that blue color. And then periodically, I move the rose out and explode it and come back and continue to clean out that blue. And then sometimes what I do is I say, what other color is loneliness? And go through the same process. So even though you're not in level 1, you do have some tools there in the book that you're reading.
Yeah, that's good points.
Here is a question from Cynthia. Ooh, it looks like level 3. Could you speak about changes in education for children?
So this is going to go back to the children. So one of the challenges is the educational system is out of present time, and it is not designed to support the education of children today. It's still constructed around information that is, much of it is not correct, much of it is very old, much of it is was assumed in the 50s and is still being taught. Plus the children today don't think in terms of the educational system's provisions. So we're going to see a challenge in that space. Coronavirus isn't helping, isn't helping. I mean, we've been driven into computer learning, so that's a positive in the longer run, but it's awkward right now. There's some really terrific programs that are being created. One in England, particularly, I was watching some information about it. Is they're basically, the kids are teaching the kids, and there's no kid left behind in the process. So some kid may not get it. They basically keep talking about it and growing it as a community learning process of that math problem or that English problem or whatever it may be. And so there's a co-creation that is being formed in the educational process of kids teaching kids themselves. Now there's a teacher and there's something to learn, but it's going to be a whole, watch it in 5-6 years from now, 10 years from now, educational system will be extremely different than it is today. But it's all about these kids.
Jim, we're over 90 minutes, but I see that there's over 400 people still online. Do you want to keep going?
Yeah, we'll do a little bit more.
Okay, this one is from Christina. What effect will the upcoming autumn equinox have on the energies coming into Earth?
So yeah, that's a good question. So when you look at a wavelength, wavelength starts from a 0 point, goes up, back to a 0 point, down, back to the 0 point. But if you turn that 90 degrees, what you watch is a wavelength that's really circular, moving through time, if you would. And so one of the things about this coming equinox is it's very much at that kind of point of balance, if you would, on one side of this curve, on one side of the spiral. This one is, the reason we paused park bench at the summer solstice was to allow this engagement of what was coming at that summer solstice. And now we're going past that kind of 0 point on the line, if you would, and moving into a whole nother creation, going into the winter solstice. So the pause was to let everything happen, and now at the equinox, the next round of motion begins to be put into place. This next round, I think, is going to be very beneficial to creating that new realm of consciousness that we're talking about. This has a lot to do with the landscape and the environments. The architecture is kind of solidly in place, but how do you create an environment for people to begin to move into that allows, I'm going to use the word safety. It's not my favorite choice of words, but it's a level of, let's call it comfortableness, feeling safer in comfortableness. And then as it gets to the winter solstice, there is a whole nother level of amplification to begin to take the fear out of the next spiral. So this is going to be a quiet evolution going into this equinox and coming out of it.
Here's a question from Terry, who's in level 3, and I have 2 cents I'd like to add to this when you're finished, Jim. Terry's asking, I've noticed, as others I know have noticed, that we're taking some physical falling down. Is this a result, at least in part, of the Earth's wobble?
What's your 2 cents?
My 2 cents, okay. So Terry and everybody, and you may have had similar situations where, for instance, 2 years ago I was running in when we were living in Vancouver, and the sidewalks are very bumpy and not well taken care of, and so I tripped and I fell, boom, and I scratched up my knee. Well, at that moment, I sat on the grass for a while and I said, okay, what's happening in my space? And I realized I was preoccupied, my attention was in the future, I wasn't present time, and I wasn't grounded. And so I'm not grounded. So what did the body do? Oh, I got to get grounded here, and I fell. And so when you bump into things, or you trip, or you fall, or things like that happen, stop for a minute and go, okay, where am I? And 90% of the time, I bet you're going to find that you're not grounded, you're not in present time, your attention is not here, it's somewhere else. And especially these days with all the stuff that's going on, the floods, the fire, the apocalypse, the plague, all this going on, it's not unreasonable that a lot of people are ungrounded and preoccupied.
Yeah, that's the answer. And there's another part of this to where we haven't touched on is that level of fear and drama and dislocation and disruption that's unfolding in this wave of light. When people are in that, they are panicked. And so one of the things that's pushing on the edge of the aura, the edge of that field, is this off-balancedness that the world is in, the emotional off-balancedness of the world. And again, another one of those reasons to play with that rose at the edge of the aura. And for many of you who are Mastering Alchemy people, I've said this recently to a number of the classes. I'm going to say it again, but hear what I'm saying. It's not a criticism in any way, is you don't know how to use that rose. Now, you know how to use the rose, but if you would play with it more, because a lot of people take it in level 1, they say, oh yeah, this is really great, what's next? And that's almost where the use of the rose gets stopped and gets lost. So if you are playing with that rose, take some time in this next week to practice it. Go to the store and put it up, and that's what you're doing. You're not going to the store and going, oh, I'll put it up and see what happens. You're walking around the mall with your rose up. You're talking to somebody conscious of having the rose up. You're just going to basically retune it, bring it into present time, get some more awareness of it. But that rose, if it's not together the way you want it to be together, a lot of the things that you're anxious about, concerned about, not feeling good about, is simply the energy where you haven't cleaned out yet that little receptor point in your field, and you're simply giving more attention to what you don't want than what you do want. That rose gets tuned up a little bit, you're going to find that you're going to keep more of the conscious engagement of the world out of your space. So revisit your rose, play with it intentionally, and tune it up a little bit.
Jim, here's another rose question. This is from Natasha. How important is the color of the rose? I find it such a wonderful tool. It also takes out disturbances from the body. Yet the roses I'm enjoying are light rosé, white, apricot, or yellow, never red.
Cabernet's not bad either. So the rose is a tool, and how you color the rose allows for different applications to occur as you understand the applications. Color. So a red rose is something that is most familiar. We're just making an assumption to people, and as you play with it, make it red to define it as a starting point. If you want to make it white, pink, other colors, great. It'll still work the same way. Eventually you get to a place where you begin to understand the application of the color. And combined with the rose allows you to begin to get other results. But you could use a dandelion. You could use anything. But the purpose of the rose is to create this point of delineation between me and the world. But the rose has actually some very specific benefits to it in that context.
Here's one from Samuel in California. I live in a wooded area and I'm fearful about fires. I put my rose up, but I'm still fearful.
Yeah, okay. So the answer is, what do you give more attention to? Your rose, or to the fires, or to the uncomfortableness of a fire? And so I kind of just said this a minute ago. You put your rose up and you stay on this side of the rose, and Shakespeare's theater is on the other side of the rose for your entertainment. But what happens is, as that gets created, particularly people in level 1, level 2 I'm talking to, is you have inside your space a whole lot of beliefs and thoughts and other people's energy that don't relate to you. And so let's say one of those is, I'm afraid of fire. And now I have that belief, and I'm now living in the woods, and these fires are starting to happen, and my fear level starts to go up. But what you're really doing is you're giving more attention to your fear level than you are to the rose. And in that context, the rose has little effect, because I believe this is much more important to look at than the rose I'm holding. So the question that you really want to look at first is, where do I hold fear in my space that, one, may not even be mine, and two, is out of present time? And so you're not trying to resolve the end game. You're not even necessarily right there trying to get this to completely go away. What you're trying to do is, where am I out of present time, and where is this not even mine? And if you clean that energy out of this, that receptor point is now much smaller. Now you can ask even a better question. What's holding this in my space? If you are playing and mastering alchemy, at that point the ability to use the 4th, 5th, 6th ray, to use the 8th ray, begins to be really valuable. This is also where color begins to be useful, because some of those color codes begin to dismantle anxiety or fear that show up in the nervous system. So the ability to recognize, I've got more attention here than I have over here on my rose, is really the first place that you want to look. As this gets cleaned out, the ability to say, okay, I'm living in the woods, is this something that I want to continue to do? Or have I protected my property adequately so if there was a fire, I'm in good shape? That's a conscious decision to be made, but can't be made from this level of fear comfortably.
Jim, let's take one more question and call it a day.
Okay.
This one is from Louise. How do I understand and stay at peace with people who keep hurting and destroying other humans and the planet?
Tough, really hard thing in a lot of ways but again, it goes right back to the last question, or even an early question. Can you do anything about that person or those people? And can you make a difference? And if the answer is no, in both cases, then I'm effectively running an energy through my space that's got me off balance. Now, I'm not making an excuse, and this is not avoidance, this is not denial, this is just simply, can I do anything about it, and is it of value to me to have this energy running through my body? And if the answer is no to both questions, then what do I need to do to get that little receptor that keeps having me look at it? So I'm an avid, I believe trees are important, and people are cutting down trees, and especially today we need trees. So, but if I can't stop the lumber company from cutting it down, I can't reduce fires at the level that's happening, is it worth that I'm holding this belief system in such an intense way when I can't do anything about it? All that's going to happen is I'm going to continue to feel angry, frustrated, and resentful. So clean out the resentment or out of the energy that's in your space that simply says, this is important, but I can't do anything about it. I'm going to just simply remove my intensity in that attention point, if that makes any sense. And as you basically back off the attention point, the uncomfortableness is going to go away, but I still have the ability to observe and then choose a way of dealing with that if it's still something I want to do. If I can basically sign a petition, go to a government official that changes things, whatever it may be, but I don't have the intense emotions that are causing me to become sick in some cases, and I'm unable to do anything about it except be resentful. So if you can clean that out, then begin to start to look, what can I do without having the emotions run through the body? This is the tools. This is how you basically begin to recognize, I have choices, but I don't have a lot of choices from fear and resentment. And so how do I begin to allow myself to raise up to that level of brightness and begin to influence circumstances that I can definitely not influence from resentment and fear? So, good questions. I hope those answers were helpful. This shifting that we're in is going to continue. It is going to accelerate. You're going to have more fires, you're going to have more floods, you're going to have more animal destruction, you're going to have things that are going to get uncomfortable. I mean, one of the topics we didn't touch upon is glaciers melting. Do you know how many people live in the mountains in the world that rely on their water source from those glaciers? And what happens when they melt? What happens to all those people? What begins to create an off-balancedness? So you're watching this slow motion unfolding. There are things you can do, and there are many things you can't do. How do you choose? And when you make that decision, how do you choose? How do you choose from well-being, that I'm contributing where I can contribute, but I'm not holding a lot of attention on what I can't influence? If you can make that distinction, and particularly with mastering alchemy tools, these tools work, your ability to get into that center point of observation and command your presence in well-being and beauty and grace, kindness, and begin to recognize what is now on the horizon, opportunity-wise, that is very different than everything that you've experienced in 3D. So, fascinating things coming forth. positively, opportunities to step into a higher vibrational field of awareness, consciousness, and begin to step into that state of how do we create co-creation, well-being, kindness, respect, and play in that space. So, so with that said, thanks for playing. Hope this was helpful. Go off, enjoy your day wherever you are in the world. We appreciate you. Blessings.